So one of the growing trends we've started to see in the Middle East, especially starting in the 1960s and 70s, has been this Islamic resurgence. And so one of the things we're talking about with this Islamic resurgence is the growth of Islamism. And this is kind of a revival of Muslim traditions. And there's many of these states feel that one of the reasons for their struggles is that they've gotten away from Islamic tradition and values. And so they're trying to reassert Islamic values back into Muslim politics, much the way it was in the original creation of the Islamic caliphates, where your laws were based on the Quran. And so some of these groups have become very extreme, using terrorism as a means to accomplish their goals. Many of them also use jihad, holy wars, to launch attacks against neighbors. And so one example of this Islamic resurgence is the Iranian Revolution. Iran, after World War II, was actually a huge ally to the United States and Western nations. And their Shah, the Shah Pahlavi, was a huge supporter of the United States. He sold tons of oil to the United States. In return, they used the money to purchase weapons from the United States. And so he had a pretty good relationship with the West. Well, in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini is going to lead a revolution in Iran. And he's going to attack US influences in Iran and ultimately take over. And Iran immediately goes from being this huge ally of the US to hating the United States. In fact, he referred to the US as the foreign devils and wanted them out of Iran and wanted to rid the Middle East of these Western influences. And so when the United States allows the ex-Shah Pahlavi into the US for cancer treatment, Iran is going to respond with the Iranian hostage crisis. And they're going to seize the US embassy in Tehran, the capital of Iran, and take over 50 Americans there hostage. And they're going to hold them for the next 444 days. And eventually, when Ronald Reagan takes office, they're going to release those hostages. We've also seen growing disunity between Arab nations. And after the Iranian Revolution, Iraq under Saddam Hussein felt that they could kind of catch Iran off guard and seize territory. And so they do. Saddam Hussein is going to annex part of Iran, the western parts of Iran, for their oil-rich territory there. And this is going to lead to an almost decade-long war between Iraq and Iran. And ultimately, the war drags on. Iraq's not able to conquer Iran, but ultimately Iran is forced to kind of sign a ceasefire agreement with Iraq. But the war really left Iran in shambles. They faced food shortages, and a lot of the programs of the Ayatollah Khomeini were delayed or forgotten because of this war. And so it really set Iran back. Following this Iran-Iraq war, Saddam Hussein, unable to take control of Iran and now in debt after this decade-long war with them, needed money. And so he's going to attack a small oil-rich nation called Kuwait and quickly takes over Kuwait. But the United Nations, led by the United States, are going to step in very quickly. They're going to drive Iraq out of Kuwait. They allowed Saddam Hussein to stay in power of Iraq, but they forced sanctions on him to try to disarm Iraq. And when Saddam Hussein fails to uphold these sanctions and agree to disarm, the US goes in 2003 and overthrows Saddam Hussein. Since then, the United States has helped prop up a democratic government there, but they continue to struggle trying to keep this government in place. They continue to face terrorist attacks and civil wars, but they are able to keep this democratic regime in place up till now.